You knew the sky was a lie. You had always known it. Even as a child, you would look up at the velvet black. The stars glittered like tiny, perfect diamonds. But they were too perfect. They never twinkled. They never shifted. They were a flawless painting on a dome of infinite size. Your parents told you this was how space was supposed to look. Your teachers explained the science of it. They spoke of the Oort cloud. They described the Kuiper belt. These were the supposed reasons for the stillness. Humanity was nestled safely inside a cosmic cradle. They called it the soul system. Your home, your prison. For generations, this was the entire universe. Earth was the green and blue heart. Mars was the red, dusty brother. Jupiter was the great, stormy giant. And so on. You knew the planets like the back of your hand. You had walked on the moon in virtual simulations. You had felt the simulated chill of Pluto's plains. But you had never felt the pull of another star. No one had. The silence between the stars was absolute. It was a wall, a solid, unyielding barrier of nothingness. Humanity had reached for the stars centuries ago. We sent out probes. We launched ships. They traveled for decades. They pushed against the edge of the system. Then they would simply stop. Their signals would cease. Their light would vanish. It was as if they hit a wall made of pure night. The official explanation was that they succumbed to the void. Space was just too vast, the distances too great. But you knew better. Everyone did in the quiet parts of their minds. It was not distance. It was a cage. A gilded cage. Beautiful and vast. But a cage nonetheless. You lived in a city that floated in Venus's upper atmosphere. A marvel of engineering. It was a testament to human ingenuity. We had tamed our own solar system. We built wonders on nearly every world. We had conquered hunger. We had defeated disease. We had achieved a kind of peace. But it was the peace of a well-tended zoo. Every need was met. Every danger was removed. And every dream of a world beyond was gently, silently crushed. The art of your time reflected it. Music had a sorrowful, longing quality. Paintings showed starships that could never fly. Stories told of heroes breaking through a sky that would not break. Deep inside the moon of Titan, a secret was kept. A very big secret. Saturn's largest moon was a place of secrets. Its thick, orange atmosphere hid a surface of methane lakes. But the greatest secret was not on the surface. It was buried deep within its rocky core. You were a small part of that great secret. You were a quantum resonance technician. It was a title that sounded important. It mostly meant you stared at wavy lines on a screen. You made sure the lines stayed within acceptable parameters. But you knew what those lines represented. They were the heartbeat of a god. Project Unfettered. That was its name. A name whispered only in the most secure locations. It was humanity's grand, desperate gamble. For over a century, the best minds had worked on it. They were trying to build a key to unlock our cage. The project was housed in a facility that dwarfed any city. It was carved out of the moon's core. The sheer scale was breathtaking. You would ride grav trains for an hour to get to your workstation. You passed through caverns filled with machinery. Machinery that hummed with impossible power. Power drawn directly from Saturn's magnetic field. Your station was in the resonance chamber, a massive sphere at the very heart of the facility. In the center of the sphere, a point of light pulsed. It was smaller than your fist, but it contained more energy than a star. This was the core of the unfettered drive. Your job was to monitor its quantum state. You watched for fluctuations, tiny deviations that could cause a catastrophe. A catastrophe that would not just destroy Titan, it would unravel the entire solar system. No pressure, of course. Your boss, a woman named Ava, once joked you had the most stressful job in existence. You did not laugh, because you knew it was true. You remember the day you first saw the core? You were fresh out of the academy. Your hands shook as you took your seat. The senior technician next to you, a man named Ben, just nodded. "Breathe," he had said. "She is fussy, but she will not bite." Probably. That was his idea of a joke. You learned to live with the constant, low-level fear. You learned to trust the hum of the machines. You learned to see the beauty in the pulsating light. It was the light of hope. The hope that one day, the sky would be real. The hope that the silence would finally end. For centuries, humanity had listened. We had built vast radio telescopes. We pointed them at the silent stars. We listened for a whisper, a sign that we were not alone. We heard nothing. The silence was perfect. It was the silence of the cage. Then, one day the silence broke. A signal pierced the static. It did not come from a distant star. It came from the very edge of our solar system, from the wall itself. It was not a friendly greeting. There was no "Hello, universe." There was no attempt at peaceful communication. It was a single, powerful burst of data. A compressed package of information that unfolded in our systems. It was a voice that was ancient and impossibly powerful. It called itself the Shepherd, and it had a message for its flock, an ultimatum. The message was simple. You are a protected species. You live in a sanctuary. This sanctuary has kept you safe from the horrors of the galaxy. The Shepherd's voice was calm. It was measured. But underneath the calm, there was a threat as cold as the void itself. The message continued. You have reached the limits of your enclosure. Your desire to leave is noted. It is a sign of your species' vitality. But the galaxy is not for you. It is a place of darkness, a place of ancient wars and endless hunger. Stay in your home. Thrive in your peace. Do not attempt to break the barrier. There will be no second warning. The message ended, and the silence returned. But it was a different kind of silence now. It was a heavy, knowing silence. The cage was no longer a theory. It was a confirmed fact. And we had a zookeeper who called itself the Shepherd. The leaders of humanity were thrown into chaos. For generations, they had governed a peaceful, prosperous society. Now they faced a choice they were not prepared for. Obey the Shepherd and remain in paradise, or defy the warning and face the unknown horrors of the galaxy. The Shepherd had given us a choice, but it felt like a choice between two different kinds of death. The choice was made. Humanity would not bow. We would not live in a gilded cage, not even if the alternative was extinction. The decision was not unanimous. There were riots on Earth, protests on Mars. Many people wanted to heed the Shepherd's warning. They preferred the safety of the known, the comfort of the cage. But the spirit of discovery was too strong. The desire for freedom was too deep. And so, the fleet gathered. It was the largest fleet in human history. Hundreds of ships. From massive dreadnoughts to nimble scout ships, they assembled in the blinding glare of the sun. A fleet built in secret. A fleet designed for a war we did not know we were fighting. At the heart of the fleet was your ship. Not a warship. Something far more important. The Stardust. It carried the unfettered drive. The key. Your team had been moved from Titan to the ship. The core pulsed in the ship's engine room. Its hum was the only sound you could hear. On your console, the clock ticked down. The countdown to quantum ignition. The moment we would try to break the wall. You sat at your station on the bridge. The view screen showed the assembled fleet, a silent, magnificent armada. The tension was a physical thing. You could taste it in the recycled air. Every crew member was at their post. Their faces were grim. Their eyes were fixed on their consoles. You saw your own reflection in the dark screen. You looked scared. You felt scared. But you also felt a fierce, burning pride. The ship's captain appeared on the main screen. Captain Eva Rostova, your old boss from Titan. She had been promoted. Apparently, keeping a miniature star from exploding looks good on a resume. Her face was calm. Her voice was steady. "All hands, this is the captain," she said. "In 5 minutes, we will attempt the impossible. We will open a door that has been closed for millennia. Whatever is on the other side, we will face it together, as one people, for humanity." The screen went blank. The countdown continued. 4 minutes. 3, 2. Your hand hovered over the ignition sequence. The fate of humanity rested on a single, glowing button. With 1 minute left on the clock, it appeared. It did not warp into existence. It did not roar into view. It simply was. Where there had been empty space, there was now a ship. Or something like a ship. It was a ghost. A translucent, shimmering form. It was miles long. Its shape was fluid. It seemed to defy the laws of physics. It absorbed the light of the sun. It cast no shadow. The fleet was frozen in shock. Alarms blared on the bridge, but no one moved. A new voice filled the comms channels. It was not the shepherd's voice. This one was different. It was softer. It felt sad. "You are making a mistake," it said. The voice was everywhere. It seemed to come from inside your own head. "We are the wardens. We have watched over you for 10,000 years. We have protected you." The ghostly ship drifted closer. It made no sound. It had no visible engines. It moved with a grace that was unnerving. Your ancestors were a vibrant, star-faring race. The warden's voice continued. They traveled the galaxy. They saw wonders you cannot imagine. But they also saw the darkness, a great predator that hunts in the void. It consumed them. It consumed 1,000 other species. We saved a remnant of your people. We brought them here. We built this sanctuary to protect you, to give you a chance to grow in peace. The story was a shock. A protected species, not caged animals, but refugees, saved from a galactic horror. The warden's ship stopped. It hovered before the fleet, a silent, shimmering sentinel. "The shepherd is one of us," the voice explained. Its message was a warning, a final plea. The predator is still out there. It is patient. It is relentless. If you open this door, you will alert it to your presence. It will come for you, and we cannot protect you out there. Please, turn back. Live your lives in peace. Do not throw away the gift of your protected past." The voice faded. The ghostly ship remained, a silent testament to a choice that was now infinitely more complicated. The bridge of the Stardust was silent. Captain Rostova stood with her hands clasped behind her back. She stared at the ghostly warden ship on the view screen. The countdown clock was frozen at 30 seconds. Every admiral in the fleet was on a secure channel, a conference of ghosts. Their holographic forms flickered around the captain's command chair. The debate was fierce. Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force spoke first. His voice was sharp. "It is a trick, a sophisticated lie to keep us docile." Admiral Sato from the Martian colonies disagreed. A lie? Look at that ship, Chen. We have nothing that can even approach it. Our best sensors can't get a solid reading. It is like it is half in our reality, half somewhere else. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have done it already. His logic was sound. The Wardens had not fired a single weapon. They had not made a single hostile move. They had simply appeared and warned them. A very polite, very ominous warning. An older admiral, a man named Singh from the Jovian shipyards, stroked his gray beard. Let's assume they are telling the truth. We are the descendants of refugees. They saved us from a galactic predator. They gave us a sanctuary. For 10,000 years, they have protected us. He paused, looking at the other holographic figures. Is a life of protected peace truly a chain? Or is it a gift? The freedom they speak of. It sounds like the freedom to be eaten. He had a point. It was the galactic equivalent of being told not to stick your hand in the tiger cage. Except the tiger was the size of a galaxy, and it ate civilizations for breakfast. The debate raged. Words like sovereignty and destiny were thrown around. They were weighed against words like survival and extinction. You listened from your console. You watched the faces of the admirals. They were scared. They were trying to make the right choice for 17 billion souls. Captain Rostova remained silent. She let them argue. She let them vent their fears and their hopes. Then she raised a hand. The holograms fell silent. They call themselves wardens, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. What does a warden do? They run a prison, or they run a nature preserve. Either way, the occupants are not free. She turned to face the main view screen. Her eyes were fixed on the shimmering alien vessel. They say they are protecting us, but they also admit they confined us. They made a choice for us 10,000 years ago. Today, we make our own. We did not build this fleet to sit in the sun and rust. We did not build the unfettered drive to be a museum piece. She turned to you. Her gaze was intense. Technician, resume the countdown. You looked at her, then at the button. This was it. The choice was made. You pressed the button. The clock started ticking again. 29, 28, 27. The choice of chains was no choice at all. Humanity chose freedom, even if it was the freedom to scream in the dark. The final seconds felt like an eternity. Each number on the clock was a hammer blow. 10, 9, 8. You could feel the ship begin to change. A low hum vibrated up from the deck plates. It was a sound you knew well. The sound of the unfettered drive waking up. But this was different. It was deeper, more powerful. It was the sound of a god clearing its throat. 7, 6, 5. The lights on the bridge flickered. The ghostly image of the warden ship wavered. Even the stars outside seemed to tremble. You felt the ship itself tremble with gathered power. It was not a violent shaking. It was a deep, resonant shudder. The very atoms of the hull seemed to sing. Your console lit up with 1,000 new readings. The energy levels in the core were going off the charts. They were stable, but they were climbing to a level that was theoretically impossible. You gripped the sides of your console. Your knuckles were white. You could hear Ben's voice in your head. She is fussy, but she will not bite. Probably. You really hoped he was right about the probably part. 3, 2, 1, 0. Captain Rostova's voice was calm. Ignite. You spoke the single word into your microphone. Ignition confirmed. A wave of pressure pushed you back into your seat. It was not a physical force. It was something else. A wave of pure quantum energy. The point of light in the engine room, the core of the drive, exploded. Not in a ball of fire, but in a silent, expanding sphere of reality-altering energy. The very fabric of space began to hum. It was a chord, a single perfect note that filled the universe. The hum grew louder. It resonated in your bones, in your teeth. The view screen went white. A pure, clean, absolute white. It was not the light of a star. It was the light of creation. The ship lurched, not forward, not backward. It lurched, inward. It felt like the entire vessel was being squeezed through the eye of a needle. The pressure was immense. You fought to stay conscious. You focused on the hum. The hum was everything. It was the sound of a key turning in a lock that was 10,000 years old. The sound of a cage door swinging open. The white light lasted for only a moment. But in that moment, you felt everything change. A wave of pure energy erupted from the stardust. It was not a destructive wave. It was a wave of information, a wave of being. It expanded outward at a speed that was faster than light. It washed over the rest of the fleet. It passed through the ghostly warden ship without effect. It raced towards the edge of the solar system, towards the wall. You saw it on the long-range sensors, a ripple in space-time. It hit the barrier, the place where our probes had always vanished. For a moment, nothing happened. The ripple seemed to be absorbed. The silence held. Admiral Chen's voice came over the comm. "Did it fail?" he asked. His voice was tight with disappointment. But Captain Rostova just watched the sensors. Her face was unreadable. "Wait," she said. Then the wall shattered. It did not break like glass. It dissolved. It unraveled like a tapestry. A wave of pure energy erupted from the machine you had tended. The great silence was finally broken. The sensors went wild. A flood of new information poured in. It was overwhelming. A symphony of chaos. The silence you had known your entire life was replaced by a roar. The roar of 1,000,000,000 stars. The roar of 1,000 unknown energies. The roar of the universe. The view screen cleared. The white light faded. And you saw it. The sky was different. The stars were no longer cold, perfect points of light. They were real. They twinkled. They burned with a fire you had never seen. The constellations you had memorized were gone. The familiar patterns were shattered, replaced by a sky that was alien, and beautiful, and terrifying. You could hear gasps on the bridge. Someone started to weep softly. For the first time in 10,000 years, humanity was looking at the true night sky. The old star charts were useless. The maps that had guided humanity for centuries were now children's drawings. Every astronomer in the fleet was babbling. They pointed at their screens. They shouted out coordinates that no longer existed. The sky beyond the broken veil was a wilderness. New, impossible constellations burned in the void. There were nebulae that swirled with colors your eyes had never seen. There were pulsars that beat with rhythms that were unsettlingly organic. It was like a blind person being given sight for the first time. It was too much to take in. Your ship, the Stardust, floated in the new reality. The rest of the fleet was forming up around you. Their running lights were like a small, familiar island in a vast, unknown ocean. The warden ship was still there. It had not moved, but it seemed smaller now, diminished against the backdrop of the true galaxy. You wondered what they were thinking. Were they angry? Were they disappointed? Or were they afraid for the foolish children who had just kicked down the door to the monster's den? A message came through from the lead science vessel. "We are detecting everything." The voice of the chief scientist was filled with awe. "Gravitational waves from sources we cannot identify. Tachyons, exotic matter. The universe is not quiet. It is a storm." The silence was the barrier. It was not just blocking travel. It was blocking everything. All this data, all this energy. It has been washing over our system for eons. We were just deaf to it. He was right. Humanity had been living in a soundproofed room with the curtains drawn. Now, the walls were down, and the noise was deafening. You looked at your own console. The unfettered drive was stable. The core had settled into a steady, gentle pulse. It was ready for its next task, not just to break the wall, but to travel through the new space it had revealed. Captain Rostova gave the order. "Take us out, slowly." The ship's thrusters fired, a gentle push forward. For the first time in history, a human ship moved into interstellar space. You crossed the threshold. You passed the point of no return. You were beyond the veil. The gilded cage was gone. The entire, glorious, terrifying universe was now your home. As your fleet pushed cautiously into the new space, the Warden ship moved. It did not flee. It did not attack. It moved in front of your formation. A silent, ghostly escort. Then the voice returned. The soft, sad voice from before. "You have made your choice," it said, echoing in your mind. "The consequences are now your own. But we will not abandon you to the dark without a final piece of knowledge." The shimmering, translucent ship began to change. The fluid lines solidified. The ghostly form became solid matter. But it was not a ship, not in any way you could understand. It was a creature, a being of immense size and impossible geometry. It was covered in plates of a crystalline material that drank the light of distant stars. It had appendages that unfurled like the petals of a flower, appendages that were larger than your entire ship. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. It was a god, a star-born Leviathan. Then, something even more impossible happened. The Wardens revealed their true, immense forms. Behind the first creature, more of them emerged. They did not appear from hyperspace or a wormhole. They simply unfolded. From a dimension you could not perceive. There were dozens of them, each one unique, each one the size of a moon. They were a fleet of living gods. They arranged themselves in a circle around your tiny human fleet, not as a threat, but as a final, silent audience. The voice spoke again. "We are not jailers. We are gatekeepers. This system was one of many sanctuaries we created across the galaxy. We preserved species that were on the brink of extinction. We gave them a chance to live, to evolve, to forget the great hunger." The revelation was staggering. Humanity was not unique. You were one of many, a whole secret galaxy of protected children, hidden away from a single galactic predator. The Wardens were not your personal zookeepers. They were the guardians of 1,000 cradles. It was a job so vast, so ancient, that your mind could barely comprehend it. They were not gods of a planet, but of life itself. "Now," the Warden's voice said, its tone shifting. It was no longer sad. It was grim. "You will see what you have chosen to face. You will see the reason for your cage." The space in front of the fleet shimmered. It was not a view screen. It was a projection. A shared vision beamed directly into the minds of every human in the fleet. The Warden showed you what lurked in the dark. You saw a galaxy teeming with life, worlds of incredible beauty, species of breathtaking diversity. You saw civilizations rise. They built cities of light. They wrote music that echoed between the stars. They created art that would make you weep. It was a galaxy full of hope, a galaxy full of dreams. Then, the Predator came. It was not a fleet of ships. It was not an army. It was a presence, a shadow that fell across entire star systems. They showed you what it did. It did not conquer. It did not enslave. It consumed. It drained the life from worlds. It fed on the energy of suns. It absorbed the consciousness of entire species. The vision was a montage of horror. You saw planets turn to gray dust. You saw stars wither and die. You saw the faces of 1,000 different species as they faced their end. Their terror. Their despair. It was a hunger that had consumed 1,000 species. A wave of silent, remorseless extinction that had been sweeping through the galaxy for millions of years. The vision showed you a great war, a coalition of ancient races, the firstborn of the galaxy, fighting against this shadow. Their ships were magnificent. Their weapons were powers that could shatter worlds. They fought with a courage that was heartbreaking. And they lost. One by one, they were consumed. The Wardens were part of that war. They were the survivors. They had fought the Predator to a standstill. But they could not defeat it. So they had changed their mission, from warriors to librarians, to preservers. They had created the sanctuaries, a desperate attempt to save some fragment of life from the all-consuming hunger. The vision ended. The space before you was empty again. But the images were burned into your mind. The gray, lifeless worlds, the dying stars, the faces of the lost. The bridge of the stardust was filled with a stunned silence. The weight of the truth was crushing. The choice was not between freedom and a cage. It was between a quick death in the light or a slow, quiet life in the shadows. Your leaders weighed extinction against submission. The admirals were on the secure channel again. Their holographic forms looked pale, beaten. Admiral Singh, the old man from the Jovian yards, was the first to speak. His voice was heavy with grief. "We have made a terrible mistake. We must beg the Wardens to take us back, to close the door, to let us live." Several other admirals nodded in agreement. The fear was a poison. It was spreading through the fleet. The bravado of a few hours ago was gone, replaced by cold, rational terror. Then Admiral Chen spoke, the same man who had called the Warden's first message a trick. His voice was quiet, but it was steady. "No," he said, "we do not go back." The other admirals stared at him. "Did you not see what they showed us?" Sato demanded. "There is no victory out here, only an honorable death." Chen looked at each of them. "I saw a war," he said. "A war that was lost because the enemy was a surprise. I saw ancient races fight alone and die. What I did not see was humanity." He was right. The vision was of a past war, a war fought before humanity had even learned to build pyramids. The Predator had been sweeping the galaxy, but it had not yet swept our corner of it. Captain Rostova's voice joined the channel. The Warden's strategy was to hide, to preserve. That is a noble goal, but it is not the only goal. Survival is not the same as living. She looked out at the real stars. They showed us a history of defeat. They did not show us a future. A new feeling began to spread through the fleet. It was not hope. It was something harder, something colder. It was defiance. Your leaders weighed extinction against a life of hiding. They chose to fight for a future they now feared. The order went out to the fleet, not to retreat, not to surrender. The order was to prepare for war. The wardens had shown humanity the monster in the dark. Humanity's answer was to start sharpening its teeth. This was not a joke about tigers anymore. This was the real thing. The Grand Fleet, the armada that had faced down the wardens, began to break apart. It was too large, too slow, a single target. Most of the ships would return to the Sol system. They would carry the news. They would begin the long, desperate task of turning our home into a fortress. But one ship would not go back. One ship was chosen to go forward. A small, fast scout ship. It was rechristened on the spot. Your ship, the Stardust, was now the Pioneer. A fitting name. Your destination was chosen from the Warden's vision, a system that had been one of the last to fall in the ancient war, a place where a great battle had been fought. It was a long way away, a journey that would have taken thousands of years with conventional drives. But you did not have conventional drives. You had the unfettered drive, the key that had opened the door. Now, it would be the engine that carried you across the new threshold. The Pioneer pointed toward the unknown. A single tiny ship against a galaxy of horrors. The crew was a skeleton crew, only the essential personnel, the best of the best. You were one of them. Your job was still the same, to watch the heart of the ship, to make sure the new god in the engine room did not falter. The mood was not celebratory. It was grim, resolute. You were the tip of the spear, the first explorers of a hostile land. Captain Rostova's voice came over the ship's internal comms. All hands, prepare for quantum leap, the first of many. She did not give a speech. There were no grand words. Everyone knew the stakes. Everyone had accepted the risk. You strapped yourself into your acceleration couch. You watched the readings on your console. The unfettered drive began to hum again. The familiar, reality-bending chord. But this time, it was not opening a door. It was building a bridge across the impossible distances between stars. The order was given to engage the new drive. Leap, Captain Rostova said. The universe outside the view screen dissolved into a tunnel of swirling light and color. Space itself folded around you. The leap was disorienting. It did not feel like movement. It felt like arrival. One moment you were in the Sol system. The next, you were somewhere else entirely. The tunnel of light collapsed. The view screen showed a new star, a new system. The journey had taken less than a minute, a journey that should have taken millennia. The unfettered drive was a miracle born of desperation. You had arrived, the target system from the Warden's vision. But something was wrong. The system was dead. The star was a pale, anemic white dwarf. The planets were shattered husks of rock and ice. There was no life here. There was only silence. A deep, profound silence that was more terrifying than the roar of the unlocked universe. This was the silence of the grave. Then you saw it. You arrived in a field of starship wreckage. It was everywhere. A vast, three-dimensional debris field that stretched for millions of miles. The wrecks were colossal, the ships of the ancient races from the Warden's vision. Some were miles long. Their hulls were peeled back like fruit. Their skeletal superstructures were exposed to the void. They were giants, and this was their graveyard. It was a monument to a long and terrible war. The Pioneer drifted through the wreckage, a tiny scavenger picking its way through the bones of gods. Your sensors scanned the debris. The ships were made of materials you could not identify. Their technology was far beyond your own, and they had all been destroyed. Utterly. Completely. There were no survivors. There were no escape pods. There was only wreckage. It was a sobering sight. It drove home the reality of your situation. The predator was not a myth. The war was not a story. The evidence was all around you. You were a very small fish in a very, very big pond. And something in that pond had teeth the size of worlds. You stood on the bridge of the Pioneer. You looked out at the graveyard of giants, the silent testament to a lost war. For 10,000 years, your species had lived in a peaceful dream, a dream of a quiet, empty universe, a universe that was safe. That dream was over. The universe was larger and more dangerous than you had ever imagined. It was full of monsters. It was full of history. It was full of forgotten wars and ancient sorrows. But it was also your universe now. You were no longer children in a protected sanctuary. You were no longer specimens in a cosmic zoo. You were unchained. The word felt right. It felt true. The fear was still there, a cold knot in the pit of your stomach. But it was mixed with something else, a fierce, wild excitement, a sense of purpose. Humanity had a new struggle, a new frontier, not just of space, but of survival itself. A message came in from the long-range comms. It was from the Sol system, a compressed data burst that had traveled across the new, folded space. It was from Admiral Chen. The message was simple. The first fortress is complete. The work has begun. Report. Captain Rostova looked at the message. She looked at the graveyard outside. She looked at her crew. Her face was set, determined. She began to dictate her reply. Admiral, she said, her voice clear and strong. We have reached the target. The stories are true. The danger is real. But so is the opportunity. She paused. We have found something in the wreckage. Not a weapon, not a survivor. Technology, a clue. The ancients lost the war, but they left behind their knowledge. We are not alone in this fight. We have the ghosts of 1,000 fallen species on our side. Your mission was clear now. You were not just explorers. You were archaeologists. You were salvagers of a lost cause. You would pick through the bones of the fallen. You would learn their secrets. You would take up their fight. The universe was a dark and terrifying place, but humanity was no longer hiding from it. The sun of a new day was dawning, the dawn of the unchained. And you were there to see it rise. The game was on, a game for the soul of the galaxy. And humanity had just made its first move.